Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby and this is my co-host,
Christopher Wells.
We appreciate all the support in our recent content. And before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes, so we are here back again with another off-season review for a couple of teams. We're going to start off with the Los Angeles Lakers for this one. We'll also do the Celtics, but we'll start off with LA, especially because in light of the recent news about Luka getting that extension, right, that puts more of their off-season in light. So they did a number of things to start off. They did lose Dorian Finney-Smith, right? He went to the Houston Rockets on a 4-year deal. But with him walking, it opened up the full MLE, and they were able to basically spread it out. They used both that and the biannual exception. They used the full MLE on a combination of Deandre Ayton, who got bought out by the Blazers in a move that none of us expected, and then they used it on Jake LaRavia, right, as kind of a, I guess, young guy, taking a flyer on him. We saw him in Vegas a couple years ago when we went to the Summer League. Didn't look that great at that time, but he's gotten much better since then. But obviously the key addition is Deandre Ayton, right? The former number 1 pick, right, who used to play for the Phoenix Suns, recently coming from the Portland Trail Blazers. There was a time when he was considered one of the rising star bigs in this league, right? I mean, when he was on the Phoenix Suns, they went to the finals. They took the Milwaukee Bucks to 6 games. They actually were up 2-0 first couple of games. He was really good for most of the postseason and for that season, right? I remember even as a Laker fan, right? I remember in the first round, he played very well against the Lakers' collection of bigs because they had a lot of size on that team, and he played very well on both ends of the floor. But in the last few seasons, it just seems like it hasn't been able to work out for him. Seems like the effort waxes and wanes. I think our first year we did the podcast, he was in Phoenix. That was his last year there. And part of the argument for, like, could Phoenix go as far as they could once they traded for Durant is, well, now Ayton's going to have a lower usage role, right? Like, he'll still have nights where maybe he puts up big numbers, but he's not going to get as many touches, and his overall role from night to night is going to be a little bit different. And it just didn't work out. He did get hurt by the end of it. And then they traded him and really didn't get a whole lot back for him, but I think his value was pretty low at that point. Then he went to Portland, and the hope was that he'd kind of be able to turn it around. Just didn't work. He's been hurt, and even when he's played, it's been okay, but nothing special. Certainly not the player that we were used to seeing, like I said, when he was in Phoenix. But then he got bought out and came to the Lakers on a 2-year deal with a player option, about $16 million, $8 million a year. And now he's kind of playing for his next big deal, because the thing is, he's probably at a point now where he's probably never going to get anywhere close to the money that he got right before he got bought out. I don't think he'll ever be like a $30 million a year player again, but could he be more than an $8 million player a year? Sure. And I think he's got a good opportunity here where he's going to be playing with Luka, presumably LeBron, as well as Austin Reeves as well. So those are all 3 high-level passer playmakers, right? He can still roll to the rim. He can pop out from mid-range. He can rebound. But again, the effort waxes and wanes each night. So what version are we going to get from him? You would think you'd get probably the best possible version of whatever's left, right? Maybe you don't get the previous Phoenix Suns version, but you'd think you get a better version than what we've seen the last few years. I mean, the thing with Portland is they didn't really have a lot of high-level playmaking, right? They had a lot of good defense at different points, mainly last year, but they didn't really have a lot of high-level ball handlers, high-level passers, playmakers. So I think that's the hope, where you can get the best out of him, maybe trim some of the fat out of his game, and help them offensively. Because, you know, post-AD trade, right, or post-Luka trade, the only center they had was Jackson Hayes, right? Then they kind of tried to fill in some of the gaps occasionally with, Christian Coloco, Trey Jemison, and then small ball, right? Like Dorian Finney-Smith, Rui, LeBron taking turns basically playing the 4 and 5. And it worked in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, it did not work against Minnesota. So now you are able to have a legitimate, viable starting center in there, right? Above average big. And that's going to help out a lot. Like I said, on both ends of the floor. He's not a natural defender, rim protector, but just by being big, just by having long arms, right, that ought to be able to help. They brought back Jackson Hayes as a, I guess now, backup big man and potential starter if Ayton has to miss time, and he's not been super durable the last few years. So that's not an ideal spot to be in, because I think we kind of learned, okay, he worked all right in the regular season, but he's probably not a guy that you want to rely on a whole lot just because he's got kind of a limited skill set. And, it seems like against playoff caliber teams, just he's not quite up to snuff. But for the regular season, it's okay. Um, and was there really anybody left on the market after that point? Not really. And then they also drafted a Thiero, right, in the second round. I don't know how much he'll probably play. He's hurt right now, or he wasn't able to play in the summer league. But on paper, he's a really good athlete, maybe the best athlete on the roster outside of LeBron, and he's got long arms. Just not really a great outside shooter. But, he can play with a ton of energy, defend, potentially rebound. I'm curious to see if they play him in some small ball lineups or just some run out transition lineups. He should be, he should probably get spot minutes at different points. We'll see what that looks like. But either way, no issues with that pick. And they traded up to get the pick and gave up nothing to get it except for cash. And I already mentioned LaRavia, right? That's a young guy, right, who's basically a wing. And we'll see what positions he plays. He's played a lot of 4 the last couple of seasons, but he may play like a little bit more 3, maybe even 2 at different points, just depending on what they do with him. I mean, defensively, not amazing. He can move his feet somewhat, but I think you're just kind of factoring in he's been able to shoot the ball relatively well, right? He's an okay athlete. There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's a relatively small deal, $6 million a year, 2 years, no option. I don't really have an issue with that. And again, then you combine the Marcus Smart addition, and this is another guy, right, where he's a defensive wizard, former defensive player of the year, not the same guy that he used to be, but he's still a versatile defender, probably best against 2s and 3s, not probably quite as much against quick point guards anymore, which is okay, just because they don't really have anybody who can really do that on the roster. They don't have a lot of guys on this roster that are defensive-minded players, right? There are some guys that can defend when they want to, but they're not necessarily known for being great defenders. So that ought to help. He's got some playmaking and ball handling chops because he ran point guard for a decent time in Boston, especially the last couple of years where he was like their full-time starting point guard. And he should be able to fit really well. Not a strong shooter, again, so that's going to potentially be an issue. And he's had a problem staying healthy the last few seasons, with a handful of injuries here and there. Also been on a couple of teams that didn't really have much to play for. So maybe how much do you factor that in? But it's still $5 million a year. So if it doesn't work out, it's whatever. It's a $5 million deal for 2 years, and the second year being a player option. So all those guys together, it doesn't hurt as bad to lose Dorian Finney-Smith. It hurts because he's a guy that is a proven rotational player for a playoff team. Helps defensively. But not much you can do about that. Seemed like the negotiations were kind of bungled, but they were able to kind of make up for it by getting all those other guys. So that's, I guess, kind of how you have to look at it. And then obviously also the big deal that we got a day or so ago was the Luka Doncic extension, right? 3 years, $155 million or so, right? Basically 50-something million a year, which not too bad, right? Just considering that by the time he goes into free agency again, he'll make more, right? He took a little bit of a discount, which is fine. And they're going to have flexibility going forward because by the end of this season, there'll be a lot of guys who will be off the books. But it'll be up to them whether or not they want to re-sign them or bring them back, right, at whatever deals, right? LeBron's going to be in the last year of his deal this season. So next season, he'll be a free agent. Who knows what will happen? Maybe he re-signs. Maybe he retires. Not sure as of yet. But either way, you look at the roster, and again, they did a good job in terms of making moves without giving up a whole lot, right? You brought in a few rotational players, including guys at positions and positions of need and play styles of need that you didn't have. So that helps, and you didn't have to give up any picks. You didn't have to give up any real rotational guys. So at the very least, you're set up going into the season at some point. Maybe you make a trade to make yourself better. We'll see. But I'd say B plus, just because, again, there are things that maybe you'd prefer that they could have done. It would be nice if you could get a better backup center than Jackson Hayes, or maybe some type of, point of attack, athletic guard that you can help defend. But right now you don't have that. But either way, at least they did some of these things, and you feel better about this roster now than coming out of the playoffs, just because none of these guys none of these guys we thought were likely to go to the Lakers. Maybe a guy like a Marcus Smart, maybe, or a Jake LaRavia, but Smart had to get bought out. we didn't know at the time whether or not he'd get bought out. And then Ayton, nobody thought was going to get bought out, right? We were talking about a lot of the rumors were suggesting that Lopez was the likeliest to go to LA, right? Brooke Lopez. So, you were able to avoid that. And again, maybe there's a quote unquote better version of this, but I think this is still a good version. And I think this will be a good team. Then you factor in the Luka piece where he's been working on his body conditioning. And so he's probably primed to have a monster season. And then maybe a couple other guys on this roster get better. Maybe Austin Reeves gets a little bit better. Or maybe Ayton has another bounce back year. And then maybe Marcus Smart has a bounce back year. There are a lot of ifs with this team, which is why you probably can't put them in the highest tier, but they're a good team, right? They should probably be a top 4-ish seed, if they're healthy and most of these things work out, with the potential to maybe be better if they make a trade, and maybe fix some of the other roster issues as currently constructed, right? Because they did lose a couple of guys. I know they lost Goodwin, but we talked about it like that was probably going to happen anyways. And, to replace him with Marcus Smart, I think is okay. I don't think it's the end of the world that you lost Jordan Goodwin. I mean, again, played well for them, but it's not the worst thing that could potentially happen to you. So I think they did good with a lot of these moves, and I'm curious to see what it looks like going forward, especially given all the drama that had been reported recently. But a lot of that seems like it's died down, and maybe some of it just never really was in the first place.
Yeah. I'm a little bit lower on the offseason than you, I think. I'm probably more in the C plus range, I think. From a talent perspective and a monetary perspective, I think they did a great job, right? Like, we all know that DeAndre Ayton can be great. We know that Marcus Smart can be great as well. I think it's just a matter of fit. I don't necessarily feel like this team has title potential, if you want me to be honest.
Right.
I mean, obviously they have a shot, but it doesn't really scream like
Not as currently constructed. I don't think they're quite a championship level team.
exactly, and it doesn't feel like a LeBron team, like a team that's catered to his needs, or it doesn't even really feel like a team that's catered to Luka's needs as well, right? I think the severe lack of a reliable, 3-and-D wing, I think is the problem for me. And not even just 3-and-D, but also, athleticism as well. I think
Right.
you can pencil in some things to happen, right? We all know DeAndre Ayton is probably going to miss time. We know that Marcus Smart will also miss time as well, just because of, his age. But, I guess the promise is, or the hope is, that DeAndre Ayton can show tons of promise, being, so young. That's the thing that people forget. It's not like he's, 30 or anything. He's only like, 26? So, there's tons of potential. That's why I like it from a talent perspective. And, you didn't have to break the bank to get these guys. And, on deals like this, I think it's pretty much a steal. But I just don't really know how I feel about the fit, right? I don't know what a team like this is going to look like, right? Like you already said it, like DeAndre Ayton's not, the defensive anchor. He can be a lob threat at times, but he's definitely not, a rim protecting kind of guy. Then you pencil that in, you don't really have, a rim protecting 4 either, right? I mean, I guess you have like Vando, but he's not going to start, right? Because he has no offense. So, and then like looking at the entire roster, right? There's not a lot of elite depth, right? I mean, there's going to be guys where I don't think they're going to play a whole lot. What does Connect look like as well going into year 2? I think there's just too many questions with this team. I'm expecting them to do something at the deadline because I don't think they have a shot. There's just no way. And I know that's kind of crazy to say considering, that you do have Luka and LeBron. And like you said, I think Luka will probably be top 3 at MVP voting. That wouldn't surprise me. I think he's going to, he's gearing up for a crazy season. You can see the writing is on the walls for sure. So he's going to have a great year, fully healthy, and coming out of the gate strong, I think, looking much better than last year. Because last year, kind of iffy. I think obviously adjusting to a new situation, new system, and also battling injuries and stuff like that. But this year, I think he'll be great. But overall, I'm kind of disappointed in the overall roster construction. I don't really think they have a title in them. And that's what I grade these teams on, right? Like, obviously, when we get to the bad teams, it'll be a completely different outlook. But, these are teams that are vying for a championship, and I just don't really see that in their future right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of, when you look at it, right, you're kind of thinking like, all right, defensively, how many guys on this roster are going to help you on that end of the floor?
Right.
Right. That's where you're like, probably not a ton. It's probably
Nope.
going to have to be a collective effort. And then you're probably going to have to bank on some of those guys. Like you mentioned, a Jared Vanderbilt, we know can be a really good defender, but he's a very limited offensive player. Can they find ways to get him in lineups where you're not really relying a whole lot on him offensively?
Mhm.
Maybe, they have some guys in that roster where they can fix it up, but he still probably also has to just be a better offensive player. And how much can you bank on that? And he's not coming off an injury, so maybe that'll be okay. But it just does feel like that contract ultimately just hasn't really worked out for them. And then what do you kind of do with some of these other guys? Like, what do you do with, right? He's in the last year of his deal. He's been the starter for a couple seasons now for the most, right? Like all of last year. And then the year before, he became a starter late. So he's basically been the starter for a year and a half. And now, like I said, since he's in the last year of the deal, what are they going to do? Are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to let him walk? Are they going to trade him? I don't know, right? If you're going to pull off some type of deal to get somebody, he's probably going to have to be one of the key pieces in the trade unless he moves into like a second unit role. But in order to do that, then you'd have to kind of look at someone else on the roster. Like, can you move Maxi Kleba? Could you move Gabe Vincent? What about Dalton Knecht? Can you move him, right? Him alone doesn't make a much of a difference because his salary is pretty small.
Mhm.
But could you combine him with somebody? How much value does he even have as a player, right? Because
True.
he, started off the year well, and then his role lessened as the year went on. And we just haven't seen a whole lot of positives from him recently, right? Like he was in the summer league, didn't really play that well. And think the concern always was going to be one, the defense, and two, what's the ceiling? He's an older rookie, so how much better is he realistically going to get? He's already 24, right? He's not that much younger than Deandre Ayton, who's been in the league since 2018. Kind of wild when you think about that.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the depth, right? Once you get past the starting five, whatever it is, right? I think you've made the case you'd like to see Marcus Smart in the starting five, right? That's kind of the thing
Yeah.
that you've mentioned
Yep.
with LeBron, Luka, Austin, Ayton. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But then if you look at the second unit, regardless of whether or not it's Rui or Smart starting, after that, right, again, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt, Jake LaRavia, Dalton Knecht, Jackson Hayes, it's not that amazing, right? Like you said, there's a lot of players, but how many guys do you realistically want playing minutes for this team, right? And that's kind of where if you map out a rotation, right, you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, there are some guys where it's like, I don't know if I can fit you realistically into the rotation. And so that's kind of, and sometimes that can be a good problem to have. I don't think it's a good problem to have here because, like you said, the bottom half of the roster is not up to snuff compared to some of these other teams. Or if you're realistically looking at it from a playoff perspective, right? Because this is a team that is looking to contend. It's not looking to be a team that just wants to make the playoffs and be happy that we got there, right? Like that's not kind of what you're looking at. And that's why, from an offseason perspective, you're kind of hoping that there was some type of home run. This isn't what you'd call a home run. It's just the question is, can you do more? And realistically, they're probably going to go into the season with this roster and then evaluate from there
Mhm.
what you're going to do. But as currently constructed, yeah, I don't think defensively it's enough, and I don't think there's enough quality depth. But at the very least, I think you just put him in the puncher's chance category. Like you have a
Sure.
puncher's
You
chance.
got Luka.
Yeah, you're in the puncher's chance category where if something goes wrong with one of these other teams, right, and then some of your guys play above what we expect them to be, maybe you have a shot. But I don't think it's a bad team, and that's kind of where the distinction lies when you kind of look at a lot of these teams. Because even when we look at some of these other teams that we'll be talking about moving forward, a lot of those Western Conference teams aren't going to be bad because of the fact that they're in the West and they have quality players. It's just once you get past Oklahoma City, right? Most of these other teams are going to be pretty close to each other in the standings. So a team like the Lakers, if everything goes right, could be a top 3 seed, right? But then if things get a little bit bumpy, a little bit shaky, they could potentially be closer to that 5, 6, 7 spot, right? If somebody's hurt or if, like I said, some of these signings just don't pan out. And that's not really ideally where you'd like to be. You'd like to feel pretty confident that, like, oh, this team is 100% going to win 50 plus games. But, it helps to have Luka plus quote unquote stuff. So outside of Luka, I guess the other question is who else would you be looking towards, to have, well, I guess you could count Ayton in there as well. But say take away LeBron because you would probably have to kind of factor in like Is he going to be as good as he was last season, or is he going to be worse? Right? That could potentially change some things, right? Because if he's still an All NBA player, then you'll be fine. But if he has a bigger drop off, that's when you're probably in trouble. But what other guy can you look at and say who's taken a leap?
Yeah, that's the problem. I think there's not a lot of guys with a ton of potential, in between, where they are right now and what their, ceiling really could be. I guess I would probably say Rui. Can he add, some things offensively and defensively? Seeing him grow from his time in Washington to where he's at right now has been pretty cool, but can he take it a little bit further? I think that's another guy.
I think that's one.
Yeah, I think AR is probably the better one. Because if he can pick up where he left off, in the regular season, that could be phenomenal. If he could take it a step further, especially come playoff time, that would be amazing as well. It's just the problem is it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Defensively, it's putting a lot of pressure on three guys who might not be your strongest defenders. Right now, you're going to be asking LeBron to have to put up a lot of effort on the defensive end, Luka to put up more effort on the defensive end, and AR as well. But I would think AR is probably primed to like I said, pick up on his role last year, and take pressure off of LeBron and Luka, because we already talked about it last season, where best third option in the league, and all he needs to do is continue to just do his thing offensively and not muck up the whole system. So I think he'll be good though.
Yeah, I think for him the catch and shoot game is probably where he would need to make the most improvements, because when he came into his own that year they went to the conference finals, he was really good as a catch and shoot guy, because he wasn't going to have quite as many on ball opportunities with LeBron, with AD, with D'Angelo Russell, with Dennis Schroeder, right? That's a lot of guys that play with the ball in their hands. And he was kind of forced into doing a lot of catch and shoot work, right? Then the following year, he wasn't quite as good in the catch and shoot areas. He was fine off the dribble, but the catch and shoot game was a little bit spotty. And so that's where, if he can improve that, because that's probably ultimately, with those three guys, that's the guy that's probably going to take the most of those type of shots, right? Because chances are Luka will have the ball in his hands the most. Then on a night-to-night basis, there's going to be nights where LeBron will have the ball more, and then Austin's the third guy, right? So I think that's kind of where he's probably going to have to make strides there. I think defensively he's fine. He's going to be a target, but he's not like the worst defensive guard in the league, not by any stretch. But that's where, when you make the case for Marcus Smart to start, that's why you make that case, because then it's like, okay, well, now he can guard some of the other teams' best offensive guys. Then it's not Austin Reeves, and then that kind of helps things downstream, right? Where it's like, okay, now that gives him a little bit more of leg room for offense, right? And then Luka, right, a little bit more leg room for offense, stuff like that. So that's where kind of some of those pieces will help. Even a guy like Ayton, right, where offensively, he's a real threat as an offensive player. And so it's not going to be quite as easy to just let's just switch our defenders on Luka or LeBron, and then we don't have to worry about their bigs at all, because they're not really going to do a whole lot.
Right.
So that's kind of where you can say it can help them as well. It's just a matter of those things will help and make them better. How much better can it make them? Like, let's just say, as of right now, like, what's the ceiling for this team, right? Maybe somewhere in the ballpark of 50-plus wins, maybe top 3 seed, but maybe like second round at best. Probably that, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the ceiling. Maybe if everything goes right, maybe conference finals, but probably somewhere in the vicinity of the second round, I would say, is probably,
I would agree,
most realistic ceiling for the team.
Yeah, I would agree. It's got to be the second round.
Yeah, and then the floor, right, would probably be similar to last year, where it's like, if you have a bad matchup, first round exit, then seeding depends on how you finish the season, right?
Yeah.
But I think you kind of look at the talent and you say, this should be this could 50 wins should be relatively reasonable for this team, right?
Yeah.
If it's, like much less than 50 wins would feel, I think, like a disappointment. So I guess the question is, say we're talking about trades going into the season, right? What are they looking for? Like, what are they still missing in terms of maybe certain types of players that they should be looking for, since they weren't able to get some of those type of players this summer?
3-and-D wings. Like I said, just kind of replicate what Dallas, was able to put together. I know that's a tall task, considering that their hands are definitely tied financially. but I think there is a pathway to do something at the deadline. I would probably look at pivoting away from Rui depending on what kind of season he has, up until the deadline. Does he take strides? Does he look comfortable in the system, with all these ball dominant players, right? So maybe, there's always some 3-and-D player that, kind of comes up, in trade rumors around the trade deadline, and then, contenders are vying for him. So I think that is probably the best thing that they should probably do. And maybe even look at potentially, a disgruntled big man, at the deadline as well. Just to add some more serious depth behind DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, because that's what I would look at is, like you said, either some type of wing or some type of backup big. Because I
Mm-hmm.
just don't think you want to go back to, all right, Aiton's out, and now we got Jackson Hayes,
Right.
and then after Jackson Hayes, you just don't have anything, right?
Right.
Like it's just, you're basically relying on two-way guys or more small ball with LeBron and Rui at the 4 or 5. And I just don't think you want to be in that spot again because we've seen that. We've been seeing that I think since we've been doing this podcast, right? We're like
Pretty much,
the
yeah.
first year we did the podcast, I think in the playoffs. What was it after AD? It was Wenyan Gabriel. I think they really didn't have a viable option as a backup center. I think it got to the point where they put Tristan Thompson right
Yes,
in
yes, it
the
did.
one of
Mhm.
those games.
Yep.
So yeah, something like that. So just it's not really a spot you really want to be in. So, are there any specific guys that you're maybe thinking of?
Mm, not off rip because, like I said, I think it's more of a deadline kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, somebody will become available.
Yeah.
Especially on some of the bottom feeding teams, right? Who are looking to probably gain some assets or things like that in exchange for talented players that should be on contenders.
Right. And since this is off-season talk, we want to mainly focus on the team as currently constructed
Right.
just because that's what we're looking at right now. So that's kind of where we're looking at it. And then I guess, if you're looking at the players on the roster, right, that are currently there, that are under contract, that we don't know what's going to happen with them,
Hmm.
which guys are you looking at to maybe take out of the rotation? Because I don't think you can play all those guys. You're going to probably have to commit to, you know, I don't know, probably somewhere between 8 to 9 guys. And
Yeah.
so he's going to have to probably get their minutes next. And some of it's just going to depend on how some of these guys play. But, just looking at it, which guys do you think are probably the most likely candidates to fall out of the rotation?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It could be. What do you think about Gabe Vincent? Um,
Yeah.
that's a
And
that's
that's
a weird guy. I think not like personally, obviously, but for this
right.
team, right? It's a weird. He's in a weird situation.
Yeah, it's funny because you look at him, say, versus a Vanderbilt, and both of those guys are kind of at their best guarding on ball guys, but they're very different offensive players, right? Because Vincent's a guard. He can have the ball, right? He can, he's at his best with the ball in his hands, but in LA, he's mostly been a spot up guy. When he's in the corners, it's fine. But elsewhere, right, it's kind of iffy, right? Because he's not like a super strong finisher around the basket. He's not a laser 3-point shooter. He's a very streaky outside shooter. But then, with Vanderbilt, you have a bigger guy, and that would allow you to lean into maybe some bigger lineups. And I think it would be better for this team to be bigger than it would be for them to be smaller. It's fine to have small ball lineups,
Hmm.
but you don't really want to rely on small ball lineups like last year because we know it's not probably going to work right in the long run because it's just I don't think defensively you're going to be able to beat some of these teams. And now a lot of these teams are bigger. A lot of these teams have added more size, so you kind of want to match that. Sometimes it's okay to pivot, but I don't think going small against a bunch of big teams, I don't think this team is built for something like that. But then the issue with Vando is he's got offensive concerns himself, right? Because he's a lot bigger than Vincent, but he's not really a strong finisher around the rim, and he's not a strong outside shooter either. So how do you really figure out that? Now he's a much better rebounder. He's got more length. So if all things were fair and great, then I'd probably go with him. But there's not really a perfect solution. So Vincent may be the odd man out because of that. What do you think between those two guys?
Yeah, that's why I brought him up because I was looking at the roster and I'm like, I don't know, because depending on how they handle the Marcus Smart situation, yeah, Gabe Vincent probably won't really play a whole lot, especially come playoff time. Maybe in the regular season, but yeah, I would definitely probably lean more towards Vando just because, like you said, I would prefer the size, and I think at this point Marcus Smart can probably hold his own against certain players, and that kind of pushes Gabe Vincent off the rotation a little bit.
Right. And then just the issue there is then you start to introduce Vando and Marcus Smart, and then you're starting to lean into some problems with a lot of guys that can't really help you space
Sure.
the floor. Again, there's no perfect solution, but this is why we're talking about the roster as currently constructed. And there
Absolutely.
are issues with the roster, even though, again, we like a number of the players on the roster, but there's still issues that you kind of have to break down. And then, Bronny James, do we expect anything out of him in year two? I mean, he had a better summer league than he did last year, but I think realistically, he probably still won't play a whole lot.
Yeah, here's what I'm gonna say, and I think this could branch into a whole discussion about all the young guys on this team, right? I don't really expect Bronny to play and do a whole lot in the regular season. I don't really expect their second round pick this year to
Right.
really do too much. Thiero or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Connect. That's the guy that I'm looking at. That's the first round pick. I expect him to be in the rotation. I expect him to have a heavy role, right? Because that's the guy ideally that you would like to kind of slot in and, okay, well, give us, a cool little 12 points on all threes, right? Like that. That's kind of the guy that you want to have in there to be able to do that. So, yeah, as far as young guys go, I'm really not really focused on anybody but Connect on this team.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because you'll hear like up and down stuff about Maxi Kleba.
Sure.
I think he's done
I agree.
as like a regular rotational piece. I mean,
Yeah.
not trying to sound too harsh, but he's 34. He's had a bunch of injuries. I don't personally see him being like a viable rotational guy.
I
I mean,
agree.
people have said that some people think he might play. I'm curious to see how that would look. I guess just because he's a floor spacing big that on paper can move his feet and switch. But I don't personally see it. And that's another spot that I think it would be nice if you could upgrade from. But given that we've seen a bunch of guys where it's like they just get bought out, like they may just not be able to trade him. Or if you do, you have to probably attach him to somebody that has a little bit more value and then hope and pray that a team will take him. Because I
Yeah.
don't think you're going to be able to switch him out for a real rotational piece. I don't think so, but maybe I'm
I
wrong.
mean,
Or if it is, it won't be until later. It won't be right now.
I always thought that he was kind of just there for emotional support for Luka. I'm not gonna lie, but I'm being real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, like you said, I think he's cooked. I don't think he's gonna
Got
really go.
workout picks, with the team. So
Sure, but I don't think he's gonna play. Like you said, it wouldn't surprise me if he's not, on the roster by the deadline. So
so yeah, we'll see what happens. But it's a lot of moving parts. And then I guess because we might as well address it. All right, LeBron. What do we expect out of him? Because he is in year 23, age 41,
wild.
right? We've heard a bunch of stuff, different things, right? Because, some people were like, oh, we think he might be gone. Most reports expect him to be back with the Lakers and play at least this season, right? Who knows what will happen beyond this season. But what are you expecting out of LeBron?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. Maybe a slight regression, but not to the point where it puts the team in danger zone of like not really getting to the playoffs or anything like that. I think he's gonna have a great regular season. It's just gonna be a matter of what does he look like in the postseason, because I really think that's all that matters. Like you look at his stats from last year, it wasn't horrible at all. He's still an All NBA guy. Still proving that longevity piece and whatnot. So maybe slightly lower numbers, maybe slightly less efficient, but not to the point where he's a hindrance to the team, right? I think he'll still be very good. I think he'll still be a great compliment to Luka at this point in his career as well. So I think they'll be a good duo. But yeah, I'm not really expecting a championship out of this year, though. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think for him, like you said, we don't know what the heck is going to happen, right? Because we haven't really seen something like this before. I mean, there's been, I guess, some drop offs in some areas, but he's still been from night to night, normally very good. Just defensively is usually where things kind of wax and wane because we know just from night to night, you're not always going to get that. I think the hope is because you have other good on ball players, right? That should probably reduce his usage somewhat. And then, like we kind of saw, maybe he focuses on some other areas from night to night. But do you think he's gone after this season ends, or do you still expect him to retire as a
Yeah, that's a
Lakers?
wild scenario and situation. I mean, clearly the front office, as we expected them to, has completely pivoted, right? They've made Luka the forefront of the team as they should. So, is there a team that's willing to make LeBron the forefront of their team at this age? I don't think so. Maybe, for ticket sales, obviously, but I don't think it would be serious, in terms of, contending for a championship. So that is kind of the weird question, but I feel like he's probably just going to stay in LA. I don't really, I mean, like, would he ever go back to Cleveland? Probably not. So that's the only thing that would be in the back of my mind would be, a nice, homecoming once again. But, yeah, I would say he probably stays as a Laker, finish his career out there.
Yeah, if he takes like a quote unquote exception level money or something like that, then yeah, he could in theory go anywhere. But if he's just looking for a similar level contract, what teams are going to open up cap space that, will have a realistic chance of winning? And that's the part where I don't know, but I would say going forward, I would expect him to, because again, this is an off-season podcast, so most of the focus is on this season. I would expect him to be in LA this year and then finish it out, and then whatever happens after that.
Agreed.
Don't know, but I don't think like, is he going to cause a stink? Like, no, I don't expect that to happen. I think he'll be perfectly professional, play like he normally does, and then whatever happens with this team happens, and then going forward, we'll move on from there. So
Yes, sir.
we'll see. So their over under is 48.5, right? According to, most of these betting odds. And again, as we've said many times, we don't offer betting advice, right? It's just over under discussion. What do you think? Do you think they hit over or under?
It's a tough one.
Last year they went 50 and 32.
Yeah. Would it be crazy to say they're going under? I'm gonna take the under.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, explain.
I think durability is going to be a question. I think you might have issues with durability from LeBron. You might have issues with it, from Deandre Ayton, Marcus Smart. And I think if those guys are out, there's probably going to be a decent amount of games that this team is going to drop. Obviously, Luka can obviously get them to the, finish line at that point. But I kind of expect them to have, just a little bit of a step back. Like, and granted, the team, I think, got better than it did last year. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword because, yeah, they're more talented, but I think they're less durable, less deep as well. So, yeah, I expect them to probably have maybe 40, 46, 45 wins, maybe around that. Not a huge drop-off, right?
Yeah, I'm going to go on over,
Okay.
because I'm just going to factor in what they did. And I'm also just going to assume that probably at some point they'll probably make some type of change. And that's the part that's tripped us up with some of these
Yep.
over-unders the last couple. We actually picked over on the Lakers last year, not even knowing what was going to happen with the
Yep.
roster. But say Golden State, we picked under because we just thought they weren't going to be good and that they probably weren't going to do anything. And then they ended up doing something in terms of the Butler trade. So I'm going to do over combined with the additions that they made plus some type of deal. Is it going to be much more than what they did last year? Probably not, because again, then you're veering into 55 plus wins. And I don't know if they can reach that. Just because the Western Conference, like you said, it's a double-edged sword because they got better, but there were other teams that got better as well. And, and some of them were probably a little bit better than what the Lakers were, right? So are they able to get, so if you're talking about how far can they go? Well, if you believe that they can go past the second round, which I think we said as currently constructed, that's the ceiling, well, then you would have to pick over for that. But as of right now, I think they could probably get to 50 wins. It's just a matter of, like you said, durability is a question mark. And for some of these teams, you don't have to worry about it as much. And like you said, then the bottom part of the roster is a little bit of a concern. But I'm just expecting that you're going to get a better version of LeBron will still be good, Austin will be good or better, and then they'll probably make a deal or something, and that will probably balance and even it all out.
Yes, sir.
Now we'll be moving on to a team in a little bit of a different spot, the Boston Celtics. So for them, they won the title, right, a calendar year ago, then tried to go back-to-back, didn't work. They lost to the New York Knicks, and then on top of that, Jason Tatum tore his Achilles. And since then, they've pretty much completely reshaped their roster, right? So they've made multiple moves over the course of the summer, right? They traded Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons, right? They traded Kristaps Porzingis for Georges Niang, right? Al Horford is a free agent, presumably gone from the roster, right? I think we're assuming that he's probably going to go elsewhere and leave Boston after playing there for a while, right? So they've undergone a lot of change. I mean, you're talking about basically, you know, two of their championship starters, right? Three of their main core rotational pieces from the last couple of seasons gone, right? And then Jason Tatum with the torn Achilles, probably gone for most of the year. We don't know when he's coming back. There are suggestions that maybe he comes back sooner than expected. I don't know, but I think it's kind of difficult to assume that he's probably not going to come back within the first few months of the season. I don't think that that's realistic. So I think that you just kind of look around at this roster and it's tough because again, Anthony Simons is a good player,
Mhm.
right? He's coming over from Portland. He's a good scorer, but he's a completely different type of player than what the Celtics have had for the most part, right? Like he's score first guard, doesn't really defend a whole lot, doesn't really pass the ball a whole lot, but he is a talent. But then we also have to ask the question, is he going to stay there long term? You know, who knows? Because people have talked about maybe they trade him because their main goal was to get under the second apron. So they accomplished that, right? And then you kind of look around and then look at these other additions, George Niang. But then they also signed a few free agents, right? I believe they signed what? Luka Garza over from
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yep.
Josh Minot, I think also
Yep.
over from Minnesota as well,
Yes, sir.
right? Two young guys that I guess, well, Garza's 27, but like, you know, two guys that haven't played a ton
Yeah.
of NBA minutes that will probably play more for them going into the season, along with Simons and Niang, right? You know, Niang is a veteran, and then Simons has been on that Portland team for a while. He's 26. So it's hard to look at what they're doing right now and saying like, oh, they had a great offseason, right? Because
No, they did not have a good offseason.
right. So, but again, how much of this is precipitated by the Tatum Achilles tear, plus losing in the second round and knowing that, okay, this team as currently constructed, probably done. So we're probably going to have to move these guys, get under the second apron. And we knew this going into last season. You just thought maybe they might have a chance to go back, and they did not. So it's weird because you look at certain angles and be like, well, if their main goal was to get under the second apron, they did succeed. They did do that. But in terms of where their roster is going into next season, it's kind of hard to really give them a good grade for that, right? I mean, like D. Just, I mean, I guess just because, I mean, Simons is a good player. I just don't really think he'll be like a long term fit or piece in Boston. Now, if you can turn him into something else, okay. But at least in terms of this offseason right now, I don't know. That's probably the only good thing that in terms of that I liked with Boston is I did not expect them to turn Drew Holiday into anybody that's like a good young player. So that's the part that I like. But none of the other stuff, just from a player asset perspective, I'm in love with, right? Like, you know, Porzingis, you weren't going to get a whole lot for him. I didn't expect him to get basically just Georges Niang, but, you know, I wasn't quite expecting a king's ransom for Porzingis. And then after that, I mean, are you a Luka Garza fan? Are you a Josh Minot fan? I mean, you know, they're not horrible, but, you know, are they going to probably be future pieces? Probably not. They also lost Luke Cornett. Couldn't even forget about him. So that's another key rotational piece. So now they don't really have a lot of centers. Most of their core guys are gone. It's going to probably be mostly Jaylen Brown, seeing if he can kind of uplift and hold a lot of these pieces together. He's obviously very good, but he's a very different player from Tatum, right? So I don't know. Like, yeah, they got under the second apron and accomplished that. But outside of the Simons thing, I don't really like a whole lot else that they did. So it's like it's kind of hard for me to give them a great grade. But I guess I also didn't expect them to as easily accomplish what they were trying to do because I
Yeah.
just didn't think that they could get off of Holiday. I just kind of thought maybe Porzingis and then maybe just Horford walks and then that's it. So they did better financially, but just in terms of like long term for this team, it's like I don't know, like they're gonna have to do quite some work, I would say, to be able to get back into championship contention again. And it's not, in my opinion, just going to be Tatum coming back from his torn Achilles. So, I mean, this is pretty much a gap year for them, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I give them a C, slightly higher, just because, like you said, they were able to get, under
Yeah, I
the
think that was
apron.
too hard.
Yeah, they were able to get under the apron, right? You don't love the return for it, but the fact that they were even able to get off of those, deals and figure this out is, I do have to tip my hat to them, right? And everything starts with the Tatum, Achilles and stuff like that. So that really, really stinks. So everything that they're doing is, I guess, in preparation for what 2027 is probably going to look like. Like that's
Right.
kind of the outlook that you have to have. I don't expect Simons to be on the team for the whole entire season. I think he'll probably be a deadline guy. Like you said, great player, great talent. Severely underrated, actually. Kind of sucks that he's been in Portland the whole time, but yeah, I just don't really like the current construction. And how could you? That's the point, right? They're trying to be bad. I think the loss of Porzingis definitely hurts. The return wasn't great. Drew Holiday, that hurts. Return was okay. Cornette, losing him for nothing really, really stings, I think, for sure. And then, replacing him with Luka Garza. Yeah, no. I don't know. I'm just not I'm not high on their offseason, but I do have to tip my hat to what they were able to accomplish. Shout out to Hugo Gonzalez too. That's the guy that they drafted. Had a good summer league, so there is that, but take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, it all starts with the Tatum injury, and that kind of doomed them, I think. And they got, sent back to reality, and now it's kind of a showcase, I guess, for, what Jaylen Brown can do and what he looks like as, the primary option on this team. But outside of that, man.
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, with the D, I think that was a little bit just too harsh because, again, like we said, you do look at the Holiday for Simon swap, and that is really impressive. Like, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, this front office doesn't know what they're doing. This is all, bad and horrible. But I do think, again, this is where grading on a curve does matter. And I think, like you said, you did a good job, in pointing out, as we said, that, like, yeah, their primary goal was not to win the championship. It's to get under the second apron and have more flexibility going forward. And that's where, like I said, they accomplished that. It's just most of what they got back outside of Simons, I'm just not really in love with.
Right.
But we also know that, like, yeah, they're probably not going to be very good going into next season. Do we have an idea of when Tatum comes back?
Not this season, but probably.
Like, do you believe what some people say that he could actually come back sooner than expected?
No, they wouldn't do that.
Does it make any sense?
No.
No.
The best rehab scenarios that we've seen across all sports in terms of Achilles are people who just sit out the entire year and some more time and come back, when their body is ready and when the doctor tells them they're ready, right? Like, it's across all sports. Like, that's just a proven fact. You can't rush an injury like this because it's a matter of getting it back into, playing shape. Because I know people have been like, oh my gosh, Jason Tatum, he's walking without a boot. That's kind of normal. It's a matter of getting it back to the NBA level. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he's out this entire year, doesn't play, and he's out for, I don't know, half of next season as well, or half of, the following season as well.
Yeah. Since this is a gap year, is there any, I guess, like, say if you're Jaylen Brown, what's kind of the main thing that you're looking to take advantage of and do, as the number one guy, right? Like, what areas of growth kind of would you like to see, seeing that, like I said, Tatum's not going to play for most, if not all, of next year?
I mean, I know he had a lot of critics last year, deservedly so, right? He had somewhat of a down year, coming off of the title. So, kind of getting back into that shape where not necessarily, to force a discussion of who's better between Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, but get back to that level to the point where, yeah, you can actually be compared to the guy. Because last year, Jason Tatum was running away with, being the best player on that team by far. So, if Jaylen Brown can kind of get back to that, and add some more versatility, I think, to creation, right? That would be kind of cool because we already know that he can get to his spots. We know that he's an athlete as well. He's a knockdown shooter, but be more efficient and create for others as well. So I kind of want to see him replicate what Tatum, does in his game as well. But I know they are two very different players, but it's possible. I think it can be done.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And that's kind of what I was thinking. Where put on your best Jason Tatum impression next
Why
season
not?
and see if you can kind of find a way to improve from a passing, playmaking, decision all around standpoint. Because we know as a scorer he's awesome. We know as a defender he's awesome. But some of the other in between scoring options, right? Like making the extra pass, making the right read. It's not that he's horrible at it, right? He's just nowhere near as good at it as Tatum. But if he can add that element to his game and be a little bit more complete, then that's where when Tatum comes back, then that's going to be an even scarier combination, right? Because then you have basically 2 point forward type guys out there that also are super skilled and versatile on the offensive end of the floor. Outside of Jaylen Brown, who else on the roster are you kind of looking at to maybe either A, take more of a leap, or B, maybe add on to whatever skill sets or responsibilities that they're going to have?
Yeah, it's a weird roster because, it's not the same as the title year. I would definitely be looking at, I think Derek White is kind of set in stone.
Right.
We already know what he is. I think he's not necessarily peaked, but, he's great. I think Peyton Pritchard, I'm not going to lie.
Hmm.
That's a guy where, sixth man of the year last year, definitely could have won most improved, right? If he can continue and kind of maybe have a Austin Reeves kind of path, that would be amazing, right? Like, last year he what is it funny? But no, I mean
No,
he averaged 14 points last year and
right.
was on 40% shooting from the 3-point line. So
Yeah.
if he can continue to improve in that regard, maybe if he gets it up to 16, who knows,
Mhm.
17, something like that, that would be awesome. Who knows if he starts, comes off the bench? I don't know what the roster and rotation is really going to look like, by the end of the season, but I would hope that he has a pretty good season.
Yeah, see what he looks like in a higher usage role, right? Like, could you see some other additions, like maybe a little bit more extra passing and playmaking
Sure.
and a little bit more comfort scoring off the dribble? Not that he can't do it, but it would be, like you said, it would be nice to see if he has that in him, if there's another level of progression, because he's been a backup, right, for Boston, right? But could he, if he continues to improve from that standpoint, become a little bit more complete, could he morph into a starting point guard? I mean, he's 28, so he's not that much younger than White, right? But he's on a really good contract for the next 3 seasons, including this one, right? With
Mm-hmm.
no option. So,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the time is now to kind of experiment and see what else you can get out of him, see if you can get out even more. Because, he was really good last year, right? He was what, sixth man of the year? So,
Yep.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So he already got better. It's just a matter of can he be even better than he is right now? So that's kind of, and there's no reason to say that he couldn't be just because, again, he'll have the opportunity to showcase it. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that, but he's got the opportunity. And then I guess since we, might as well mention it because it's kind of the big acquisition for them, Anthony Simons, right? How's he going to look here in Boston compared to what it looked like in Portland, where he was sharing, the stage with a bajillion other guards? Now there's a number of guards here, but not quite as many, right? Because in the main rotation, it's Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. Whereas in Portland, I mean, what was it? Scoot Henderson with Simons, with Shaden Sharp, and whomever else was on that roster at the guard spot. So, I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, overall, this team is weird, right? And like I
Right.
said, it's by design. They're not trying to be good. They were trying to get under the second apron, and that's what they've done. The guard room is honestly the strongest part, I think, of the roster, right? You do have Derek White, you do have Anthony Simons, and you do have Peyton Pritchard as well, right? So I mean, like that doesn't really concern. And you have the Hugo Gonzalez guy that they just drafted as well. So that really doesn't, what's up?
You're high on him?
Yeah, pretty high, all based off the summer league, right? Like I'm not expecting him to be a star or anything, but I think he could be a solid rotational piece for them. He's only 19, but how much play does he get? That would be the question. Um,
Right.
but I think the center position is where I think things are going to get nasty for them because I believe Neemias Queta is going to be their starting center.
Yeah.
So
That was
yeah, how is that going to look? I mean, like, cool, the guy can throw down some dunks, but can he do anything else? I don't know.
yeah, that was actually going to be one of my next questions
Yeah, so
about like who's the starting five.
Yeah, so the team is awkward, and once again, by design, but I'm sure they will figure out a way to not be the worst team in the league. Like that's not what we're saying here. It's just don't expect title Boston or even Boston from last year. There's going to be a
Right.
very, very, very significant drop off, and people are going to see
Yeah.
how important Tatum is to this team.
Right, and that's the key thing is that I'm not quite sure that the gravity of what Boston has done this offseason has like been completely realized yet. Because obviously we know that Tatum tore his Achilles, but I don't know if people have actually grasped like, yeah, this team is not even beyond Tatum going to be very different next year. And like you said, it's by design. So that's kind of where you're looking at this roster, and I'm curious to see what happens. As for Simons, I mean, again, just continued natural growth as a player, right? And just again, he's going to be in a different system. Some of it I think might cater to his strengths offensively, just because we know Missoula wants him to get up a lot of threes, and I think that's something that Simons can do in terms of his skill set. So we'll see what happens there. But like you said, I would think at a certain point, showcase him, see what he can do. Maybe you flip him. I mean, worst case scenario, you could bring him back and re-sign him. I mean, I don't think he'll make, 30 million a year going forward like he was for Portland. It just doesn't seem like that's where we are in terms of those type of players. But, I don't know. It seems like Boston kind of likes mainly in their starting five, mostly two-way guys where, Simons hasn't, to me, shown enough growth on that end of the floor to really be in that category. Right. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think he could be a starting guard on like a really good team?
Who is this? Sorry.
Simons.
That's a
Because it feels
problem.
like
I haven't
Because it
seen
feels
him.
like he's in that category of, good scoring guards, but probably more ideal off the bench. But
Yeah,
he's also like he's still very good.
yeah. I hate this type of discourse because I think it always digresses into, well, we haven't seen the guy in winning basketball, right? And I hate putting guys in that box, but I don't know what he looks like in a winning situation. Obviously, this isn't going to be a winning situation either. But I think you kind of have to give him a chance, right? And it's another
Yeah,
thing. Same thing as DeAndre Ayton in terms of the age thing that we were talking about earlier, right? He's only 26. Simon's only 26, and he's already, super, super good. So, in terms of, getting better and better, I'm not sure. I think he might be a little bit too one-dimensional to be a point guard or even a shooting guard on a, contending team, right? Great numbers,
mhm,
great scoring, but outside of that, right? What can he bring to you outside of, showcasing his bag every single night, right?
yeah.
He's not a defender. He's not a table setter, right? And I think that kind of archetype of player is what you're really looking for. If you're a scorer in this league, I feel like you have to be putting up, 25, 30 if you really want to be on a contender. You know what I mean? But that starts a whole rabbit hole of, like I said, players who aren't equipped to play winning basketball. But I think you do kind of have to put him in that fringe box. But I don't know. We haven't seen
I
it.
think yeah. I think if you're a good passer playmaker and not like the most horrific defender in the world, I think you might be fine. Like I think as like it can't just be oh you can only score and that's it. Like I think outside of that you got to at least be able to either pass and play make at a quality level, defend at a one of those two skill sets beyond just the scoring. And I guess the closest to winning basketball that we saw him in was the 22-23 season, I guess, right? Like cuz the stretch before Portland just turned the tank on
Sure.
and Lillard got hurt, like Portland was a decent team and Simon started for that team and averaged like 20 a game, 4 assists, little under a steal. Again, like you said, not like a crazy great passer playmaker, right? And not a crazy great defender, but he was a starter on a team that was like decent for a decent chunk of the season. Like I said, until things went awry. He played in 62 games, so he missed 20 games. And that team ended up finishing 33 and 49. But I remember earlier in the season, right? They started off well, right? Now maybe I guess you could say that ended up being a fluke or a mirage. But even that year, I mean, Damian Lillard, right? I think he ended up only playing 58 games because they shut him down the latter portion of the season. So during the stretch where they were mostly healthy and they were good, that's probably the closest that we saw. So there may be something in there. But again, what would the ceiling of that team have been? Probably just a playoff play in team, right? So that's kind of where you have to weigh it as well. So could he start for a good team? Probably, but like, could he start for like a championship level team? I'm not sure, but that's not really the question. But like you said, we have to see it first. And with this Boston team, like they have good pieces from quality teams, but as a whole, they're not going to be very good. So we're still probably not really going to see what it looks like, but maybe they can at least kind of coach him up and get him to kind of build some quality winning habits because this is a team that was a championship team just a calendar year ago.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see. But like you said, for Boston, it's a different grading curve because we know they're not looking to win the championship next season. So, that's their goal. And, we'll see what it is. They're over under, a little bit different than the last team that we discussed. Their over under is 42.5. 42.5.
See, that's the thing. The East is weak. But is Boston strong enough to get that many wins in a conference like that? No, I'm going to go under.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go under.
I think that's an obvious one, right?
Yeah. Unless like Tatum comes back really early and he's really good. Like I don't see them being able to get. But I mean, like, what's the best case scenario for this team? Like, what is it? Like, I guess the question is, will they be in the play-in? I think is the question because, So, but like, you could be in the play-in in the East and win 40 games.
Yeah.
So, like, will they make the playoffs? I don't know. I mean, it depends on who they play in the play-in. But, like, they could easily win 42, 41 games, be like, I don't know, 8-10 in the play-in, and then still lose. And then and then they miss the playoffs. So, are they going to be a 30-win team? No, I don't think they're going to be a 30-win team. But I think it wouldn't shock me if they're below 500, barely hanging on to the play-in, and then they're there. But like you said, because the bottom of the East is so bad, like there's no way they're going to be worse than the bottom. But they'll be maybe worse than some of the lower-ranked teams in the West. Because say, I don't know, a team like the Spurs, right? Like I think the Spurs should be better than Boston, next season. But they're not in the East. So, we'll see what their over-under is. But I don't expect Boston to be great next year. Like I think that's one where, if it's over, I'd be kind of surprised because like I said, that would have to mean that either Tatum came back early or something crazy happened with somebody on this roster that we didn't expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Did you like any of their free agent signings?
No. I'm going to be
like,
honest.
do you see okay, like I was going to say, like, do you see anything out of any of the guys they grabbed?
I see absolutely nothing.
Nope.
Okay. I'm just being real, right? Like there's a reason why those guys were buried on Minnesota's depth chart, right? Granted, it's a good situation for those guys, right? They get to showcase, their skills, whatever the case may be. But I'm sorry, I just can't find the silver lining in that situation. Like I said, the only saving grace is Simons. I'm excited to see him get a change of scenery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe mine out over Garza, but that's pretty much it.
Even then, for me personally, I'm just being real.
Right. No, I get it. So now moving on. Let us know your thoughts in the comments about those teams' off seasons. But after that, we did have a pair of extensions that I guess we'll talk about. We kind of already talked about the Luka one, right? Because the other day he did sign what was expected to be, that 3-year, $165 million extension, right? So presumably by the time it ends, he'll be in year 10, probably opt out of that player option and then get that massive extension, right? It could be in the ballpark of $400 million. But like I said, it was expected that he would sign this extension and stay at least in LA for now. But it does give them a little bit of flexibility because he did take less money than I think what we probably expected. But now he's pretty much set because, like you said, now they're kind of in the stage of starting to build the team around him. They got the extension, so now you got him on board. Now you just kind of have to continue to, figure things out and kind of move on with the roster and see what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a problem with it at all. We kind of expected this. I think, we talked about it during the breakdown, off-season breakdown for them. So we expected it to come very swiftly. And lo and behold, here we are.
Yes. And then we missed the other extension that happened last week, or I guess over the weekend. So we'll talk about it now. But Mikal Bridges and the Knicks, 4-year, $150 million extension. This is something that we talked about. We asked the question of, would the Knicks extend Mikal Bridges? And I think we were both in the line of, yeah, it'll probably happen. I wasn't sure if it would happen right away, but I thought eventually it would. Thought it would happen. And lo and behold, it happened. It happened very quickly, right?
Yeah,
Not too long after we said it.
pretty
So
much.
it was a little bit less. I think his max was 156. So he took a little bit less, to continue to help them maintain flexibility, right? Kind of like what Brunson did.
Yep.
So now they have him, they got Brunson, they have OG, Josh Hart, and Towns all under long-term deals for now, right? Like I get Towns was already under a big deal because of the Minnesota one, but now all those core guys are locked up for X amount of years. So this is probably the team going forward because there was a report that suggested once they heard that Giannis probably wasn't going anywhere, then they were like, all right, let's just fire up the extension. But either way, no issues with it. I mean, it's a lot of money, but we know that the Knicks, when they're healthy and when they're whole, this is a good team. And again, going into next season, they should be one of the favorites to come out of the East. And you don't really want to go into next season with any real weird questions about, like, is this guy going to be moved or is this guy going to be moved? Like, no. Now all of them have been signed. You got a new coach. You brought in some free agents. Be a few more roster spots that they'll have to put up. So now this is the team. Should be good.
Yeah. Shout out to Brunson, right? It all starts with him. If he doesn't take that initial pay cut, then none of this is possible. So shout out to him setting the tone and stuff like that. And yeah, that starting five is going to be elite next year. I think, them having, the year of experience under their belt, with Boston getting worse, Cleveland under fraud watch. I think it's New York's time to potentially, represent the Eastern Conference. We'll see though.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you're a Knicks fan, you should be feeling pretty good going into next season. I think, they got a really good chance to be able to make a deep run again next season and maybe go even further. We'll see what happens. And then after that, we did get a couple pieces from Mark Stein. We already talked about one of them, the Luka one, but there was another one that did come out about De'Aaron Fox, and that, according to a lot of insiders that he talked to, a lot of people are not quite sure that Fox will get the max contract extension because just like Luka, he's now eligible for a new max deal, right? 4 years and $223 million as of Sunday. But as of right now, we don't know. Now, Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, he said that the talk around, according to his sources, he thinks that Fox will sign an extension, but it'll probably be like Luka's, less than the max. So we'll see what happens. I mean, they traded for him. I mean, given how they traded for him, my guess would be that he probably does sign an extension, maybe less than the max. They do have a lot of guards, so we have to see what it looks like going forward. But, either way, I'm curious to see what this pairing looks like just because we barely saw anything from these guys right after the trade. Yeah, thank you. It was like 5-6 games. So we really didn't get to see a whole lot. They didn't win a whole lot of them. But, then Wemby goes down. And then obviously after he goes down, then they shut De'Aaron Fox down. So now they brought in Dylan Harper. They brought in some vets like Cornette. I mean, we'll get more into the offseason discussion when we get there. But, I think he'll sign the extension at some point, and they'll build around these guys, and they'll kind of figure out where.
Yeah, I mean, the sky is kind of cloudy in terms of this decision, right? Because you do have some crazy guard depth on this team, very underrated, right? You have Castle, you have Dylan Harper as well. So is there a need for Fox? You could even question, is there a need for those guys, right? Because you have an elite talent in De'Aaron Fox. But since these guys have only played 5 games in total together, with Wemby and Fox, that's the part that's like, okay, well, let's just give it, a little bit of time, right? Like, let's not, rush to any bad decisions here. But, yeah, I think you should definitely sign the extension. Even if he doesn't, right? I don't think it's the end of the world because you have a great backup plan in Dylan Harper.
Yeah, so you think he'll sign it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so we'll see going forward. Like I said, my expectation as well is that he'll sign an extension at some point. Just because, I know stuff happens. Like, they didn't expect to get the number 2 pick, but they did, and you got Dylan Harper. But as of right now, Fox is really good, right? Right now, he's better than Harper. Maybe Harper will be better down the line. But as of right now, like I think they could eventually play together. So, we'll
Yeah.
see what happens. Again, let's see what it looks like. Let's see what the pairing looks like because we saw so little of it.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Maybe if Wemby takes another leap, maybe the Spurs will be even better than a lot of people expect they might be. So we'll see. I'm excited to see what that group looks like.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So now, as we usually do when we close out these episodes, we're gonna once again discuss, our IG polls that we put out. So our last one that we put out was tied to the Denver Nuggets. And our question was, will the Nuggets win the West? And it was 50-50 in terms of the responses. So again, I think people are split on what they expect of Denver. I think most people like everybody likes what they did in the offseason. But I think people also recognize there's some other good teams, including Oklahoma City as well. And I think a lot of people expect Oklahoma City should be better. And then even beyond that, right? You got teams like Houston, Minnesota, whomever. So they can win the West. It's just a matter of will they? That's where I can understand the
Yeah.
split.
Yeah, exactly. I think that makes sense. The results don't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Then we actually recently, in the last hour before, as we were recording, we got a comment on our short
Oh,
from the Nuggets' best team in the West.
okay.
Are they the best team in the West? And the comment from Stevens Chepper 2947 said, just 2 words: stop it.
Ooh, okay. Well, we're not.
So
No, the Denver hype is real. I think it's legit, right? Like you have arguably the best player in the world, right? You do have Jokic. You got better. You got deeper, right? So why not? I mean, I think there is a possibility. It all depends on what the playoff landscape is going to look like, who's healthy and who's not. Simple as that.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. Again, the West will be very competitive. There's going to be so many good teams, and I think it's going to be really tough, outside of Oklahoma City to project who's going to win it. I think Oklahoma City is definitely the favorite, but given, like I've said many times, history is not necessarily on their side in terms of them going back to back. Somebody else could definitely make it out if things go their way.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Off Ball Takes podcast. If you want to let your thoughts be known, let your thoughts be known on the off seasons of the teams that we've covered so far, and what you think of what they did. What do you think of potentially De'Aaron Fox, whether or not he sticks around in San Antonio? And then, of course, if you want to leave a comment on any of our platforms, just go at the OBT podcast on any of the socials in the description below. And of course, leave a comment on our shorts or our videos and try to read them and pick one and talk about it at the end of the episode, and continue to like and subscribe because we've gotten a decent number of subs from our last few shorts over the last couple of weeks. So clearly people like what we're doing with this off-season discussion. So we're going to continue to do these from here on out, until something else happens with the season. So we appreciate all that, and we'll see you in the next episode.